Every software feature, from a button change to a major release, goes through a similar journey. But most people never see what really goes on behind the scenes. So let's walk through the full life cycle of a feature from idea to launch to see what each team does to make it become real. I'm Josh, software exec, former startup founder and consultant, and on this channel, we crack open the secrets of the software industry. We interact with new features every day, whether you open your browser and there's a new AI summary button on the side, or you have to wait an hour to download the latest video game patch because it's 10 gigabytes or more. But how does a software feature go from an idea or a feature request or even a bug report all the way to your computer? What does that journey look like? Now, this journey is going to look a little different from company to company, but they're all going to share a lot of the same basic features in common. So let's start at the beginning, the idea. Everything has to come from something. It doesn't just appear out of thin air, right? So at some point, somewhere, someone had an idea, and this turned into a feature request. And when a feature request is made, that's actually a full process right there. Maybe it came from an exec, or maybe a customer wrote something in a feedback form. But that seed is where the journey starts. And now that an official feature request is logged, investigation into the possibility of making it a reality actually starts. That feature request, maybe it's in a ticketing system, maybe it's in a Word doc. It's handed off to the product team to write up and investigate. And it's the job of the product team to take in all of those requests, log them, organize them, track them so that they can see how many people are asking for certain features and get feedback on requests, track the requests through the rest of the process, and notify kind of the relevant parties when those features are going live. And the first part of that process is understanding and prioritizing those features. So there's a lot of different ways to prioritize features, but generally there's a few different phases. You can't fully understand the need or the desire or ROI of a request without a lot of investigation. And it's not necessarily realistic to do that full investigation on thousands and thousands of requests. So there's a few rounds that these tend to go through. And just because a feature fails to pass around today doesn't mean it won't succeed later on when it comes up or is requested again. So the first time someone asks for something, it might fail. But the 20th, that's going to be a different story. So let's say our feature passed the prioritization step, and now it's a go. Now we need to really fill out and fully document the scope of the project. This is called the requirements elicitation phase, and it's where the product team goes out into the world and determines what the requirements are to build the project. What the feature will entail, what determines successful implementation of that new feature. And all of this information is stored in what's called a project requirements document, or PRD. This is the biggest research phase, and oftentimes customers will be polled or requests for more information will be sent to some people who requested this feature. And the product team will get on interviews with stakeholders. That's a fancy way of saying people who are interested in this feature, and then take all that info and collect it into a comprehensive plan. Part of this is understanding the level of effort of the project. How long it's going to take, how many people will need to work on it, as well as putting together the initial timeline for building and going live with the new feature. This is necessary so the feature can be added to the team's roadmap, whether that be in the coming weeks or years. Once the PRD is ready and the project is on the roadmap, it's time to put together a team and build it. So now that our new feature is fully fleshed out and we know exactly what needs to be done and how long we have to do it, someone will be put in charge of getting it to the finish line. This person is called the product owner. It's going to be their job to put together a team that's going to implement the project. That team is going to be different depending on the company, the feature, the requirements, but there's going to be a few common parts. There's a project manager in charge of keeping everyone communicating, keeping everything on track and on time, and getting updates to the rest of the team. Sometimes really large projects might even have more than one PM. And then you have the implementation team itself. Usually a few developers across multiple disciplines, maybe a full stack engineer, a front-end developer, and a database engineer. Could be anything from 1 or 2 people to a team of like 50 plus, on depending whether you're working on a small bug fix or a new version of Windows, for example. That team then needs to put together the functional specifications document, or FSD, which governs, from a technical perspective, the code, the database side, and how the implementation is actually going to function. Once the team has been assembled and the functional specs have been defined, it's time to get to work and build the feature. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, as this one could be like a whole video on its own, but I'll give a little bit of insight here. So first, the team is going to have to fork off the part of the application that they're working on. And what does that mean? The entire application, all of the code, all the images, all the graphics, everything, it's stored somewhere that's called a repository. And obviously, you don't want to mess with the live stuff while you're developing something new. So you go and you create a copy of this repository, and that's separate from the live app. That's called a branch in the technical lingo. Now, once they have a separate branch and can safely edit the code without affecting the live app, that's when the development begins. Code is written, graphics are developed, database tables are updated, etc. And then it's all packaged up into a new version and sent off to QA. Once the build is complete, the engineering team will hand off their projects to quality assurance, or QA. During the development and build process, the team is going to be testing their own code and kind of validating that everything's working as expected. But there's a saying, you don't know what you don't know. It's actually really hard to test your own code just because of kind of your own implicit biases and expectations and kind of the blind spots as the one who wrote the code. So you kind of know what you're expecting. Also, engineers are notoriously bad at testing their own code. So the packaged up feature, now probably called a version, is handed off to QA to run through their independent testing process and bounce back any issues they have to the development team to fix before getting it out the door. This is a very iterative process. Often it takes several iterations where the dev team will build, QA will test, dev will fix, QA will test again, and on until the version is deemed complete and ready for release. So once everything is developed and tested, it needs to be distributed to the customers. In the before times, this just meant burning CDs and distributing them. But now this is the realm of release engineers. So remember earlier we talked about branching off the application. It's the job of the release engineers to take that branch and merge it back into the live application and distribute those changes to the customers. There's a lot of different ways this can happen actually. You might be familiar with a video game patcher, which is software that sits on your computer and it checks for changes, and when changes occur, it pulls them down and updates the game. This is one method for software that lives on a local computer. For cloud-hosted applications, a common strategy is called blue-green deployment. In this method, there's actually two versions of the live application that are up and running. There's the old version with all the customers on it, and there's the new version with the update. And then customers are slowly moved over from the old version to the new version, kind of in between actions, so they don't even realize they're being updated. And once all the customers are on the new version, then the old version can be wind down and removed. Also common at this stage to kind of A/B test features or even roll them out to limited audiences for beta testing, giving some customers access to new features used to test kind of early adoption, validate usage, and if there's any bugs remaining that didn't get caught in the QA or development process. Now that the feature's live, we're at the end of the journey, right? Not quite. Just cause the feature shipped doesn't mean it's done. Now it needs to be supported. And this is where customer support or customer experience team comes into play. In fact, their job is just getting started. Now that the new feature hits, there's going to be a tidal wave of incoming customer messages, asking how to use it, why it's there, how it works, why is it blue and not green, has this always been there, and kind of letting them know what they would have done differently. Primarily though, customer support is there to train new users in the new feature and help them use it. Although there's tiers of support for elevating issues that may be beyond basic walkthroughs, all the way up to potentially elevating a bug back to the team that built the feature. And there you have it, from idea to production and beyond. That's how a feature comes into existence. So if you found that helpful, please like the video. If you have experience shipping features or any frustrating stories about new features that you've used, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you'd like to see more videos on the software and tech industry, follow the channel. There'll be more coming soon.